Maintaining a gas blowback airsoft gun really doesn't need to be difficult. As with magazine maintenance, which we covered in a previous video, it just comes down to using optimal tools and techniques. So today, we're going to show you how to keep gas guns functional and protected with a minimum of effort and expense. First, we'll show routine cleaning and maintenance, then get progressively more in-depth with deep cleans. So here we have a Viper Tech AR and a Tokyo Marui Spec Glock, chosen because they're both fairly typical designs internally. The first question to ask when performing maintenance is, does the gun actually need to be cleaned? Well, the simple answer is only if the gun needs it, meaning it feels rough in cycling, the accuracy is noticeably reduced by fouling in the barrel, the gun has been exposed to sand, mud, or other contaminants, or there's significant discoloration of the lubricant. Well, both of these guns were dragged through sandy soil in their last outing, so while they seem to cycle fine, I'm going to perform basic cleaning and re-lubrication just to be on the safe side. So first things first, field stripping. For the AR, I'll remove the carrier, remove the charging handle, and then separate the upper and lower for convenience. For the Glock, I just remove the slide and take out the barrel. Now it's time to wipe out any old lubricant, so I use a paper towel and scrub off the contact points. If it's the first time I'm doing this, I'll also use isopropyl alcohol to make sure I remove any residual factory oil hiding in the pores of the metal, but after that it's usually sufficient to just wipe off the parts. An old toothbrush is also handy for scrubbing out corners, just don't use it to brush your teeth later. I also make sure to thoroughly wipe out the receiver of the rifle and get the slide rails on the pistol. I'm not going into the fire control groups yet, but I will gently wipe off any visible accumulation on the surfaces that contact the bolt or slide group. For the barrels, I take a small piece of microfiber cloth or a cotton cleaning patch, soak it in isopropyl alcohol, and push it down the barrel with a plastic cleaning rod from the breech end. I'll repeat this a couple of times until the barrel is visibly clean, then run a dry patch or two. It's not necessary to adjust the hop for this, and in fact it's ideal to leave it at its intended setting to ensure that any residue on the contact patch gets cleaned off. That's it for cleaning, so now we can lubricate and reassemble, which means we have to talk about lubricants because this is apparently a bit of a contentious subject. The common recommendation is silicone oil. It's cheap, it's readily available, it's easy to apply, and frankly, it makes life harder than it needs to be because there are two problems with it. It's silicone, and it's oil. So the reason silicone has historically been used as an airgun lubricant is because it provides excellent chemical compatibility with the hard O-ring compositions often found in airguns. However, virtually all the O-rings used in airsoft guns nowadays are either nitrile rubber, which most non-silicone lubricants are fine with, or silicone rubber, which is the one thing that silicone lubricants should never be allowed to contact, so this particular property is generally unnecessary. Additionally, silicone itself is an okay lubricant for O-rings, but it's not ideal for metal-on-metal contact because it provides poor boundary lubrication. Metal parts lubricated with silicone alone will still abrade under pressure, and the resulting sludge accelerates further wear and tear, so synthetic lubricants with better boundary lubrication properties, or additives like PTFE, are more effective. And the other issue with silicone oil is that, well, it's oil. While oil does create a very slick surface at first, it will gradually creep away from where it's applied, redirecting it from areas that do need lubrication to those that don't. The alternative to oil is grease, and in relatively open systems like gearboxes or guns, grease stays put and does not creep. So bottom line, silicone oil can work, but other products will both work better and need to be applied less frequently. We recommend Superlube Synthetic Grease, product code 21030. Chemically, this is a synthetic oil with an added emulsifier soap to thicken it, and it contains PTFE as a boundary lubricant, which helps prevent metal-on-metal contact and greatly reduces wear. Most grease, including this one, is grade 2 or about the thickness of peanut butter, so it has to be applied thinly to avoid excess friction. I use a cotton bud to rub just a bit of grease onto contact points, and that's all it takes. Just a thin film of grease provides all the lubrication the parts need. This grease is non-toxic, so you can also just use a finger for larger areas, but a pointed cotton bud is good for tight spaces. On an AR carrier, the primary contact points are these 4 corners, then the underside where the hammer rides, a little bit towards the tail of the carrier, and the outside of the gas key. After the gun's been used, it gets easy to track what points need to be lubricated by observing wear patterns on moving parts. The important thing is to ensure all points of metal-on-metal contact are lubricated on at least one of the parts involved, so I'll also go ahead and apply a little to the charging handle. While I'm doing this, you may notice that virtually all the areas I'm lubricating are places that gas never touches in normal use, so oiled green gas is not a substitute for proper maintenance. It will, however, get oil in places you don't want it to be, so as in our magazine maintenance video, we recommend using straight propane or oil-free green gas and just perform appropriate maintenance as needed. Anyways, that's it. This AR is cleaned, lubed, and ready for reassembly. A quick function test shows that it's cycling smoothly, so this rifle is back in action. Now while this grease works very well for protecting the parts and providing adequate lubrication, it isn't quite as slick as freshly applied oil. If you want that slicker feeling, or are working on a gun with very light springs where any over-application of thick lubricant might gum it up, you need a thinner grease. So you can either look for a grease with a lower grade, or you can thin out the grade 2 grease yourself. Here I have Superlube synthetic oil, which is the exact same stuff as the grease minus the emulsifier. If I mix the oil and grease in equal parts, the result is a thinner grease, about grade 0 or the consistency of mustard. Again, I use a cotton bud, and I smear it on the frame rails, the slide rails, and a little bit on the slide surfaces that interact with the fire control. Again, the goal is to ensure all contact points are lightly lubricated. Then reassemble, wipe off any excess on the exterior, and function check. Both guns should now be good to go for at least a few thousand cycles under typical conditions, and this process does not need to be repeated on either until the action starts feeling noticeably rough. Because airsoft guns don't accumulate powder fouling like real guns do, this grease coating will persist until contact wear, dust, or foreign debris start to clog it up. So to recap so far, if you want to keep it simple, just buy Superlube synthetic grease. This tube is product code 21030, and it's safe for metal, plastic, nitrile rubber, everything in a typical airsoft gun that needs lubrication. If you want a little slicker, you can either look for a synthetic grade 0 grease, or just mix the Superlube with its corresponding oil to achieve the correct consistency. And if you suspect you are working with exotic O-ring compositions, then Superlube does make a silicone grease as well. It doesn't lubricate quite as effectively as their main product, but it can still be used in all the same ways, just keep it away from silicone rubber. Now that we've covered basic cleaning and lubrication, let's move on to the 2 areas of more long-term maintenance. First, an insufficiently lubricated nozzle may stick in the carrier or slide, and this can happen even if the gun is being used with oiled gas. The classic fix is to pull the nozzle forwards and drip oil onto the O-ring or gasket, lubricating it with no disassembly needed. However, this oil will quickly get blown out by pressure when the gun is fired, so this has to be reapplied fairly frequently. As we mentioned in our gas mag maintenance video, the idea that the nitrile O-rings will soak up oil to seal better is just a myth. They just need some form of lubrication to prevent ozone embrittlement and reduce friction. So we instead recommend disassembling the gun far enough to extract the nozzle, the exact process for which will depend on the gun. Once it's out, check for nicks or gouges in the rubber, and if there's any visible damage, then replace it. If it's intact, apply a thin smear of grease to both the rubber and the interior surface of the carrier blowback unit. For most guns, this treatment will last until the O-ring or cup seal needs to be replaced, so this is functionally one and done, we can reassemble. And lastly, the very deepest cleaning we can do is full disassembly of the fire control group. This isn't necessary for routine maintenance, but if sand or dirt get into the fire control group, it can accelerate wear and cause malfunctions, in which case it will have to be cleaned. As well, many airsoft guns come from the factory with inadequate lubrication on the fire control parts to begin with, so particularly with guns with pot metal internals, it may be worthwhile to clean and lubricate the fire control group after initial break-in, even if the gun seems to be working fine. Now we can't show full disassembly of every Airsoft fire control group because this will vary a lot, but with the 727's fire control group disassembled, we can at least show the process of cleaning and relubricating. Each individual part is wiped down and cleaned with isopropyl alcohol. As before, the use of isopropyl ensures that no residual oil remains so the grease can go right onto bare metal. I apply a thin coat of grease to all contact surfaces on each part, again making sure not to apply so much that it impacts function. Once all the parts are greased, then the fire control group can be reassembled and function tested. This grease coating should last effectively indefinitely. It will significantly reduce wear, lessening the need for replacement parts, and will also protect against corrosion where bare metal is exposed. So all in all, the full ideal maintenance regimen for a gas blowback gun looks like this. First, periodically clean off old grease, swab the barrel out with isopropyl, and reapply grease to contact surfaces on the carrier or slide. Second, if the nozzle sticks or has noticeable friction, or if there are efficiency issues that suggest damage to the nozzle's seals, remove it, check for damage, and grease both sides of the contact points. And third, if the fire control group is malfunctioning or feels gritty, or if this is a new gun and you want to preserve the stock parts, fully disassemble the fire control group, clean, and relubricate. Generally, routine maintenance only requires that first step, and how frequently this actually needs to be done, of course, depends on how much you shoot. But with grease, it should not be necessary to clean after every game, and it shouldn't take more than 10 or 15 minutes to complete. Combine this with our gas magazine maintenance guide to keep the mag sealed, and you may find that maintaining gas guns becomes more of an occasional chore than a constant battle. That's all for today, so we hope you find this video useful, and thanks for watching.